Well, friends, like I mentioned earlier, we're continuing our look at the 12 steps, and we're in step 11. Step 11 says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. The scripture that goes with that is Colossians 3:16. Let the message of Christ dwell in you richly. Other translations say, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. So, as we're looking at our walk through the 12 steps, we are getting closer to the end of it and being reminded that for those of us in recovery, in a recovery journey that leads us closer to Christ and closer to each other, we never truly finish this idea, this concept of the 12 steps. For many people who've been in recovery for many years, they'll attest to the fact that once they finish step 12, they oftentimes started right back at step 1 with different realizations, different insights, different spiritual awakenings, even as a result of these steps. One of the key components of any recovery journey, whether you find your recovery in a 12-step fellowship or any other expression of recovery, is this importance and emphasis on gratitude, on being grateful. So tonight we stop and we look at where God has brought us from, where God is taking us to, and where we are right now. And we're asking ourselves, how can I be grateful? What do I have to be grateful for? What are the blessings that I might be overlooking in my own life? So why is gratitude important to recovery? The truth is, for many of us, when we showed up here, whether it be from drug addiction, family issues, codependency, or dependency on any other substance, person, or any other thing, we were not overflowing with gratitude. We were not joyous to be around. We did not take the time to look and find blessings. We saw the world through a negative lens. Recovery asks us to not only find gratitude for what God says God will do for us, but also to find gratitude for what God has already done for us and placed around us. In a world and in society today, it is too easy to simply walk into a room and point out what's wrong, the things we want to change, the things that could be better, or the things that used to be that way that we wish would return. The message of Christ, the message of the gospel, is not things will return to the way they used to be, but God will make things better in a different way than we will ever understand. God's entire point is not to return us to the Garden of Eden, not to return us to before Adam and Eve sinned, but God is trying to take us somewhere new and unimaginable. For many of us, we struggled with being grateful because we let fear take over our minds, take over our hearts. Fear was the guiding emotion and the guiding action in most of everything that we did. In my recovery journey, I look back and I see that I was so afraid of losing the things that I loved that I was holding on to them so tightly that eventually losing them was the only option. Losing things like my freedom, my family, and even the things that brought me joy. Fear Fear in any form always takes away from us what we love and separates us from others. For some of us, we were afraid of rejection. And in our fear of being rejected, we began to reject ourselves. We were afraid of being rejected and began to reject our true selves. The rejections of ourselves began when we started looking outwardly to other people, places, or things for our identity. When the message of the gospel, the message of God, is not to find our identity in the things around us and the things that we see here and now, but to find our identity in Christ, who is deeper than materials, who is deeper than situations, who is deeper than even our desires. It has been said that addiction is no more than simply trying to solve an inward problem with an outward solution. If we're being honest, before we started our recovery journeys, before we started living in sync with Christ, or attempting to at least, when we looked inwardly, we were confused. As Paul put it, he had the desire to do what was right, but he could not, and that baffled him. I was talking to a friend this week who was at a meeting, and they were talking about the fourth step. And he said it always got around to the part that made him uncomfortable, where it asks you to list off your assets. And I struggle with that too every time I've ever put pen to paper and started working on a fourth step and am asked to write out what is good about me. I almost every time inevitably quit and go to something else. I get done with writing on those steps quicker than the bull threw me off its back in the one rodeo I rode in. But that section where it asks us to look at our assets is important because it reminds us of the progress that we have made. The progress we've made in living in community and living authentically in this world. For so many of us, we were struggling with finding the good in ourselves to the point we began not to be able to see the good in anything at all. If it's your first night here, if you're watching us online and you don't really understand what this recovery thing's about, just know that it's okay. It's okay to question the process. It's okay to question the things that are asked of you. And it's going to be okay. If these ideas that I've talked about before we entered into a relationship with Christ seem like a distant memory, if you're like me and your active addiction seems so far removed, just the fact that you have that separation from the hurt and from the trauma, that is something to be grateful for. If it's your first night here, something to be grateful for is the fact that you will hear over and over again that there is hope. There is hope in this world. If you don't like where you are now, be grateful that you don't have to stay there forever. If you're in a good place, be grateful for where you've come from. Wherever you're at in the spectrum of life and in recovery, we all have the opportunity to be excited about where we are going. And we can celebrate the fact that we do not have to go. We do not have to journey alone anymore. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Here Paul writes, saying, whenever we ask of God, whatever we ask of God, we should always ask with a grateful heart. That's not to say that God only listens to people that are grateful. We see throughout the Psalms God taking special care of the heartbroken, of the confused, and of the needy. Recovery, it's about moving our hearts, our minds, and our bodies to be more grateful, to a place where gratitude overflows from us, to be more grateful than we were before. Psychology Today says that keeping a gratitude journal can improve your life in 7 different ways. It includes helping you sleep better and having positive reinforcements about ourselves. I know for me, there are plenty of times that I get down on myself and I'm able to open up a notebook that I've written in as I become more and more negative about everything going on, all the situations I'm finding myself in. I can open up this notebook and look and see the things that I was grateful for last week or the last time I was happy. Oftentimes, for many of us, our sponsors or our accountability partners are the people that continue to encourage and prod us to find gratitude in every situation, in every encounter we have. I know that before I started working the steps, I did not write. I did not keep a journal around my bed or in my car. And my sponsor encouraged me to do that. And I became comfortable with writing things down again. That was a tool that I learned before I ever started working the steps. And it came in handy as I started writing things down throughout working the steps. It still helps me to write things down. I have sticky notes plastered all over my wall in the office or all over my desk as it is. And even today, when I get down on myself, the fact that I've written down things that I'm grateful for, things that I often overlook, it's like a snap that brings me back to reality. Gratitude is what helps me remember that whatever I'm going through isn't that bad. As we were reminded on Easter Sunday, as Pastor Sarah likes to say over and over again, the story of Christ is that the worst thing is never the last thing. And that's true for us as Christians. So as we're looking at areas to share our gratitude, to begin journaling about it, I can think of 3 very easy areas in which we can start to look for things to be grateful for. We can give thanks for one, we can give thanks for God, what God's doing in our lives, how God has been working even in the chaos, even in mysterious ways. Another area we can be grateful for is the people we find in our lives, the communities we've found ourselves planted in, how they are impacting us, how they're transforming us. and what we have to offer back to those communities. In the third area, we can simply list out the work that we are aware of God doing in our own lives and in our recovery journeys. Psalm 107, verse 15 says, "Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind." For some of us, we've came here, we've started the recovery journey full of resentments towards God, towards other humans, even towards ourselves. And that's all right. God doesn't want us to sugarcoat how we feel or how we think. God is big enough to handle any resentment that we might have against God. He is big enough to handle our anger and our questions. For many of us, when we started the recovery journey, we were starting from square one all over again. And that gives us an opportunity to rekindle, to restart relationships, not only with our families, with our loved ones, with our community, but also with God. We can start to begin a new relationship with God just by saying thank you for the basics of life. One of those basics is community. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15 and 16. "And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in the one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, with all gratitude in your hearts. Sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. Let the message of Christ dwell in you richly," as other translations say. This message of hope, this message of love, this message of community. So the next question we can look at when we are talking about looking at areas in our lives to be grateful for. Who are you thankful for? Feel free to write those people down. You can ponder on exactly why you're thankful for them. You can even share your gratitude with them throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your life. For some of us, this is the first season in our life where we are mentally and spiritually present, where we are able to be with the people that we love as we celebrate the gift of life. So may we have a deeper awareness in each and every moment of not only the world around us, of God at work within us and around us, but also a deeper awareness for those that we are thankful for. The third area that we can easily start to share our gratitude with is our own recovery journeys. Whatever God has brought you from and wherever God is bringing you to, that is recovery. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." The race God has set before us. Every time I read that verse, I'm reminded of Bill Wilson and what he wrote in the Big Book. on page 164. Abandon yourself to God. Bill wrote this pretty much as his benediction to those that read the book, as his sending forth, as his final thoughts on the matter. Abandon yourself to God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road to happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you. May God bless you and keep you. One of the ways in which